Right, both Canada and Mexico want to save North America-wide free trade, but they both know that they can't control what the U.S. does. Now both countries face the renegotiation of the CUSMA Free Trade Agreement next year, so this is a chance to coordinate their negotiating positions and strategies.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has just returned from Mexico City, where he met President Claudia Sheinbaum. The images of the two leaders side by side are more than routine diplomacy. They mark a deliberate attempt to reset a relationship that for years drifted in what analysts call benign neglect. Tensions had even flared when Canadian provincial leaders suggested Mexico was undercutting Canadian workers. For Mexico, that was a slight not easily forgotten. Carney's trip was about repairing that trust, but also about something larger. At a time when the United States under Donald Trump is leaning inward and destabilizing trade with aggressive tariffs, Canada is searching for partners who can help balance the risks. The question is whether this outreach to Mexico can provide a stronger foundation as North America heads toward another round of negotiations.
History shows why this matters. During the last difficult NAFTA negotiations, Mexico quietly shared information with Canadian officials that allowed Ottawa to prepare responses when Trump tried to corner them. That cooperation allowed Canada to secure fairer terms on steel and aluminum tariffs. Fast forward to today, and the playing field looks different. Mexico has been granted a 90-day reprieve on Trump's new reciprocal tariffs. The relief covers cars, steel, aluminum, and copper. Canada did not receive the same treatment. It is a classic divide-and-conquer strategy from Washington, one designed to split partners and test their resolve. Carney's mission in Mexico was therefore not just symbolic. He needed to show that despite past friction, Canada and Mexico can still act as allies when facing the weight of U.S. tariffs.
The talks, however, were not a one-way street. Mexican leaders emphasized that Canadian mining companies must respect strict environmental rules if they want to keep investing. This reminder speaks to long-standing disputes about the impact of Canadian mining operations abroad. Beyond that, Mexico is eager to grow trade flows in both directions and attract more Canadian capital. Both sides are also preparing detailed evaluations ahead of the 2026 review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. That review will determine whether the pact that replaced NAFTA continues in its current form or evolves into something broader. Here lies a key opportunity. Canada and Mexico are both members of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. That membership allows them to coordinate on exports to Asia-Pacific markets, something the United States cannot do. By pooling production capacity and leveraging trade access beyond North America, the two countries could increase competitiveness at a moment when global supply chains are being reshaped.
The contrast across the continent is striking. In the United States, the economy is showing signs of strain. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate climbed to 4.3% in August 2025, the highest since 2021. On September 17, the Federal Reserve cut its benchmark interest rate to a range of 4 to 4.25%, citing a weakening labor market. Economists warn that a combination of slower job growth and persistent tariff costs could tip the U.S. toward stagflation. Canada faces challenges of its own. Statistics Canada reported the GDP contracted by 1.5% in the second quarter of 2025, and unemployment reached 7.1% in August. Yet Ottawa is pursuing a different strategy. Carney is betting that by tightening economic ties with Europe and Mexico, Canada can diversify trade, reduce vulnerability, and attract new investment. The takeaway is clear. The United States is wrestling with policy uncertainty and the risk of recession, while Canada is trying to build resilience through diplomacy. Carney's meetings in Mexico City were not simply photo opportunities. They were part of a calculated effort to secure allies before the difficult USMCA review begins in 2026. Whether this approach succeeds will depend on how much Canada and Mexico can align their interests. But in a time of volatility, even modest steps toward cooperation may give Canada a stronger footing in North America's shifting landscape.
They're coming home. They're all coming home. And we want them to come home. They have to come home. We're going to treat them really well. If you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge.
President Trump promised that tariffs would bring production back to American soil. His message was clear: pay more if you build abroad, or come home and create jobs in the United States. But as his new tariffs began reshaping the industry in 2025, the outcome was not what he imagined. Instead of jobs flowing into Michigan and Ohio, thousands of new opportunities are about to open just across the border in Canada. And the best example of this reversal comes from one of America's most iconic vehicles, the Ford Super Duty.
Ford Motor Company announcing it will begin assembling F-Series pickup trucks at its Oakville plant starting in 2026.
The $2.3 billion investment in Oakville will bring 1,800 jobs to the Oakville Assembly Complex. Ford says the move will add capacity of up to 100,000 additional units.
Back in January 2024, before Trump's new tariffs were even on the table, Ford quietly made a historic decision. The company announced a $3 billion investment to transform its Oakville plant in Ontario. Originally slated to produce electric vehicles, the facility would now pivot to building the Super Duty pickup truck, starting in 2026. The reason had little to do with politics. Demand for large trucks remained strong, while global demand for EVs was slowing. Meanwhile, Ford's factories in Kentucky and Ohio were already stretched to capacity. Canada offered the perfect solution: a modern facility, abundant and cheap hydropower, a stable workforce with fewer strike risks, and government support to smooth the transition. In short, the Oakville pivot was about meeting market demand.
But then came the tariffs. On August 1st, 2025, Trump raised duties on Canadian goods outside USMCA from 25% to 35%. A week later, global tariffs ranging from 10% to 50% hit dozens of countries. Steel, aluminum, and copper from Canada and Mexico faced a punishing 50% levy. Trump's goal was simple: make it too costly to build anywhere but the United States. Yet reality quickly turned against that plan. Retooling or expanding plants inside the U.S. was slow, expensive, and complicated. Labor costs were rising. Strikes had disrupted production in 2023 and 2024, and infrastructure upgrades were lagging. Suddenly, Ford's 2024 decision looked far more strategic than anyone had realized. What was meant as a production shift for market reasons became a shield against Trump's tariff storm.
For Canada, the benefits are immense. Beginning in 2026, Oakville will roll out tens of thousands of Super Duty trucks every year, supported by 1,800 direct jobs and thousands more in supply chains. The investment marks a fresh wave of industrial activity in Canada, while auto workers in Detroit, Toledo, and Cleveland face layoffs and uncertainty as rising costs squeeze U.S. plants. The irony is striking. Ford's market-driven decision from 2024 now falls into a tariff environment that makes Canada more attractive, turning the country into a quiet winner in North America's auto realignment. Meanwhile, American plants are groaning under the weight of Trump's metal tariffs. With steel and aluminum taxed at 50%, analysts estimate the average U.S.-built vehicle now carries nearly $5,000 in additional costs. For the Detroit 3 automakers, the losses could run into tens of billions of dollars in 2025 alone. Consumers feel the squeeze directly as showroom prices climbed by thousands of dollars. While Canada can leverage cleaner energy and steady supply chains, American factories are forced to grapple with higher raw material costs and reduced competitiveness. What was meant to be a protective shield has become an anchor dragging down the U.S. industry.
Ford's pivot to Canada was not caused by Trump's tariffs. The decision came more than a year earlier, driven by market realities. But once tariffs hit in 2025, that move turned into a perfect counterexample to Trump's vision. Instead of jobs flooding back to the Midwest, Canada gained the upper hand. The lesson is simple but powerful. Trade policy without infrastructure and labor readiness can backfire. Trump wanted to bring the auto industry home. Instead, his tariffs may have guaranteed that one of America's most iconic trucks will be built proudly in Canada for years to come.
If you took away tariffs, we could end up being a third world country. We're leading because of tariffs.
President Trump has tied his economic vision to tariffs. He recently warned that without them, the United States could slip into becoming a third world country. That message came just days after a federal appeals court ruled that much of his program, built on emergency powers, was unlawful. The administration is appealing, but the stakes are high.
And those sweeping tariffs have collected so far $210 billion. Now, if this appeal by the administration does not ultimately stand and the administration has to cease collecting tariffs on October 14th or has to pay back those tariffs, that gets a bit complicated.
If the Supreme Court does not side with the White House, the government may have to refund more than $200 billion already collected from American importers and retailers. Canada is watching closely. Prime Minister Mark Carney reminded Canadians that 85% of trade with the United States remains tariff-free under the current agreement. He described this as the best deal in the world, while noting sensitive sectors such as steel, aluminum, forestry, autos, and copper that need attention. The contrast is clear. Trump frames tariffs as a shield against collapse, while Canada emphasizes stability and preparation.
Even before the court ruling, stress was visible in the American economy. The July job openings and labor turnover survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed 7.18 million jobs available against 7.2 million people seeking work. For the first time in years, job seekers outnumbered open positions. The same month's employment report revealed only 73,000 jobs created nationwide, a sharp slowdown. Industries felt the pressure unevenly. Healthcare and social assistance lost 181,000 job openings in July. Retail trade dropped by 110,000. Construction, manufacturing, and wholesale trade saw modest gains. These shifts highlight how Americans are finding it harder to secure steady work, just as tariffs raised costs for businesses. The uncertainty over whether tariffs will survive in court adds another layer of strain.
I last spoke to the president Monday evening. We spoke at length on a wide range of issues, including on trade, but geopolitical, other issues, labor issues, etc. It was a good conversation.
Against this backdrop, under Carney's leadership, Canada is strengthening key industries at home and preparing to expand its trade relationships beyond the U.S., while still keeping most cross-border commerce stable and tariff-free. Mark Carney has emphasized that the foundation of North American trade remains intact. By pointing to the 85% of commerce that flows tariff-free, he sends a message of reassurance to both Canadian industries and American partners. He acknowledges the trouble spots openly. Steel, aluminum, autos, and pharmaceuticals are under pressure from Washington's tariff focus. But rather than react with fiery rhetoric, his government is preparing for the scheduled review of the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement next year. Carney also revealed that he held a lengthy conversation with President Trump on the 1st of September, covering trade as well as geopolitical and labor issues. At the same time, Canada's top civil servant was in Washington meeting with American counterparts. This careful but active diplomacy underlines a key difference. Where Trump leans on drama and constant warnings, Canada relies on quiet engagement and strategic groundwork. The signal to Canadians is that their country is not powerless in the face of tariffs, but has tools, alliances, and preparation on its side. The clash of approaches could not be clearer. Trump's gamble is to hold up tariffs as the shield for American prosperity, even as courts challenge their legality, and labor data shows the strain. Canada, meanwhile, practices strategic patience. By emphasizing long-term stability, preparing for the USMCA review, and keeping diplomatic channels open, Ottawa positions itself as the responsible partner in North America. The months ahead will test which strategy prevails. If tariffs are struck down or forced to be repaid, Trump's economic cornerstone could crack. If they survive, costs will still weigh heavily on U.S. businesses and consumers. Either way, Canada shows that it is ready, not just reacting. That steadiness may ultimately prove to be the stronger force in shaping the future of continental trade.